Welcome back, my dear friends. Today, I will share real-life horror experiences of hospital workers. But before we start, I'd like to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel. Right now, only 30% of people watching our videos are subscribed, and your subscription will really help us keep creating more of these horror videos for you. Thank you so much for your support. And now sit back and relax and enjoy the video if you dare. Mystery of Office Number 13. I was never an odd individual. Science had forever been my aid, and as a doctor, I was familiar with looking for consistent clarifications for everything occurring around me. Yet what I encountered in Office Number 13 at the clinic, where I worked, made no sense, all reason leaving me with questions I might very well never resolve. When I acknowledged the situation at NHS, I was energized. I realized it would be a difficult work, yet I additionally remembered it as a chance for proficient development. The hospital was huge, with a steady progression of patients, and the clinical staff were constantly pushed as far as possible. I was relegated to an office on the ground floor, number 13. Whenever I first heard the number, I didn't respect it. Simply one more number. My most memorable day in Office Number 13 started like some other work day. The room was efficient, with a spotless work area, an assessment table in one corner, and a rack loaded with patient records on the contrary wall. Anyway, as I shut the entryway behind me, I saw something unconventional, a sharp, disagreeable scent that appeared to exude from some place in the room. I quickly remembered it as sulfurous smell I had experienced in my college days. Yet why it waited in a clinical office was past me. I opened the window to ventilate the room, figuring it very well may be extra synthetic substances in the air. Yet the smell persevered. Faintly, I zeroed in on my work, taking care of persistence, yet that bizarre feeling of disquiet waited over the course of the day. The sulfuric scent wasn't the main thing annoying me. The air in the office felt harsh, like something undetectable burdened my shoulders. As the days passed, I started to see more eccentricities. The air in the office was generally cold in any event. When the remainder of the hospital was warm, I checked the ventilation framework, thinking an issue with the warming. Yet everything appeared all good, yet the cold continued unnatural, as though it came from a spot pass. Standard to summon slowly, I began hearing stories from my partners about Office Number 13, some taking a gander at me would feel sorry for when I referenced where I was relegated, while others kept away from the subject. By and large, it was only after weeks after the fact that a senior medical caretaker nurture unobtrusively trusted in me that the office had an awful standing, as per all her PCPs who had worked there grumbled of a similar sulfuric smell and puzzling chill some professed to have. Felt they were in good company in the room, that something concealed was dependably present. At first, I attempted to excuse these remarks as simple happenstance or idea. Yet, as these odd events turned out to be more regular, combined with the developed uneasiness I felt in the office, they started to wear me out. I began showing up working with a feeling of fear I had never referred to before, like expecting something horrendous to occur at any second. One specific morning stays scratched in my memory. I showed up sooner than expected at the hospital, wanting to survey a few documents before patients started showing up. As I made the way for Office Number 13, the sulfuric smell was more grounded than common. I turned on the light and saw something peculiar. The documents on the rack were dissipated across the floor, like somebody had tossed them. I bowed down to get them, and as I contacted the papers, a serious cold shot through my hands like frostbite. Attempting to persuade myself it was a weird event, I checked the documents, yet the vibe of an inconspicuous presence in the room wouldn't pass. At the forefront of my thoughts, I revealed the issues to the support staff, specifying the scent, the cold, and the chaos. They examined the office, yet saw as business as usual. The ventilation framework worked fine. There were no gas breaks or compound deposits, and no proof of anybody entering during the night. It was then that I understood what was going on couldn't be made sense of legitimately. As the weeks went on, I started encountering other disrupting peculiarities. Objects directly in front of me would sporadically appear to continue on their own, only a slight shift, like prodded by an inconspicuous power. Yet just when I wasn't taking a gander, at times the air in the office felt weighty, like the walls were shutting in. My associates gave ideas on the best way to manage what was going on and encouraged me to bring defensive charms or have the office favored, while others recommended I demand a reassignment. Yet I realized it would be hard. Office space was restricted, and I would have rather not seem feeble or odd before my boss. So I set out to remain to confront whatever was in Office Number 13, and to take care of my business. As far as I could, yet the circumstance just demolished my well-being started to crumble. I experienced difficulty resting. And when I figured out how to snooze off, I was tormented by bad dreams that left me depleted. After waking, I longed for shadows moving in the office of cold that consumed me and left me dead. I would awaken around midnight, soaked in sweat, my heart hustling, persuaded that something awful was unavoidable. My partners begun seeing the adjustment of me. I looked paler, more slender, and continually depleted. I attempted to keep up with my incredible skill, yet I realized I was near the edge of breakdown. The trepidation I had attempted to stifle for such a long time had totally assumed control over me. Each time I ventured into office number 13, I felt like a piece of me was being depleted, like the actual spot was siphoning my energy, my very life. At last, I was unable to take it any longer. One evening, following a particularly troublesome day, I concluded that I needed to leave office number 13. I was unable to work there anymore. I went to my boss and mentioned a reassignment. I didn't offer quite a bit of a clarification, just saying that the office was unacceptable for work. Amazingly, my solicitation was met without obstruction. My manager gave me a look that proposed he definitely realized what was occurring and let me know I would be moved to office number 14 right nearby. The change was prompt. From the second I left office number 13, I started to feel better. The steady cold that had tormented me for a really long time disappeared, and my well-being began to further develop. The bad dreams halted, and I was at last ready to rest calmly. The sulfuric scent was abandoned, secured in that office. I currently stayed away from no matter what except for office number 13. Didn't stay empty. One more specialist was relegated to it soon after I left. I didn't enlighten him anything regarding what I had encountered. I would have rather not affected his insight. It wasn't long anyway before I started to see similar indications of fatigue in him, similar side effects I had gotten through. I wasn't shocked when a couple of months after the fact he mentioned to be reassigned. From that point forward, a few specialists have burned through office number 13, and every one of them have detailed similar encounters. The sulfuric smell, the odd cold, the sensation of being feeling the squeeze. Not a single one of them have remained there for long. The office keeps up with its vile standing, and however, the hospital doesn't straightforwardly recognize it. Reassignments in that space have become normal now. Every time I elapse by the entryway of office number 13, I feel an ache of dread I never used to permit myself to feel. I never again attempt to find coherent clarifications, since I realize that whatever occupies that room challenges reason. Some say the office is reviled, others trust it's a gathering of pessimistic energy. Yet I know there's something more, something that can't be made sense of with words or sane idea. What I realized in office number 13 is that not all things can be controlled or perceived. There are powers in this world that we can't fathom, and in some cases everything we can manage is keep away from them, stay far away, and acknowledge that we don't have every one of the responses. From that point forward, I've become more wary, more mindful of the spots where I work and the energies that encompass me, since one thing has become clear to me: office number 13 isn't a conventional room. It's where the baffling shows, where any endeavor to find rationale turns into a worthless demonstration. And however I have abandoned it, its shadow actually waits in my day-to-day existence. I realize I will always remember what I experienced there, and that the experience has transformed me everlastingly. Now, every time I get a weak whiff of sulfur or feel an unexpected chill in the air, I'm helped to remember that place, that room that makes no sense, and reason office number 13 is still there, sitting tight for its next casualty. And like numerous before me, I might dare to dream that whoever takes that space is ready for what looks for them, since there's something in office number 13 that doesn't have a place with this world, something that never ought to have been upset and maybe never can be pacified. What did you think of this story? Let us know in the comments. And before we move on to the next tale, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Ghost of Grieving Mother. At Christian hospitals settled in the core of a busy city, days and nights pass with the typical musicality of a medical institution. Stretchers quickly moved by nurses, the consistent comings and goings of doctors, and the unending mumble of life fighting between the walls of its rooms. It was anything but an uncommon hospital, yet for the staff and patients, it was where day-to-day fights for endurance were battled, until one day things started to transform. Everything began with a case that, from the outset seemed like simply one more in the extensive rundown of day-to-day misfortune. Yes, a woman named Sarah John was conceded an emergency. To conceive a newborn, she showed up in the dead of night, shouting in torment, and misery got by her significant other, who could scarcely hold back his frenzy. The doctors acted quickly what ought to have been a convoluted yet sensible conveyance, transformed into a nightmare kick Sarah died on. The surgical table her body unfit to endure the unexpected. Complexities, the child also was lifeless. There were no festivals, no cries of an infant, just a harsh quiet in the room from that night on the hospital was never something very similar. At first, it was only talk among the staff. Nurses working the night shift murmured that the hallway toward the maternity ward appeared to be hazier than regular, despite the fact that the lights worked entirely. Some professed to have seen a figure meandering between rooms, yet they excused it as weariness or stress. Following some serious time work, nobody needed to concede that something surprising may be occurring. It was simpler to accept that long shifts and fatigue were to be blamed for the odd impressions that appeared to wait in the air. Yet things just a short time after Sarah's death, a nurse mysteriously slopped through one of the corridors close to the maternity ward. The floor was dry without any spills or obvious justification behind for her fall, yet she broke her lower leg upon influence. The episode was recorded as a mishap. However, the attendant still laid up swore she had felt an abrupt coldness minutes prior to losing her balance. Then a doctor who had been available during Sarah's failed delivery experienced a panic attack in a minor surgery. Without advance notice, he dropped his instruments, shaking wildly. When he was eliminated from the working room, he could hardly talk. All he figured out how to babble was that he had seen something reflected in the glass, a presence that shouldn't have been there. Days after the fact, he asked a quick transfer to another hospital. Referring to individual reasons, the whole hospital sank into an environment of developing distress. Apparently little irrelevant mishaps started to gather objects, moving without explanation, lights glimmering in, and generally disrupted of all that constant presence in the maternity ward's lobbies. A few workers revealed seeing a woman meandering, volatile, generally close to the rooms where new moms rested. In some cases, she was only a temporary figure trapped toward the edge of their eye. Different times, a foggy outline of a woman that disappeared when somebody attempted to approach, so that those close enough could see her face straightforwardly. The experience was much really like the figure of Sarah, or what survived from her meandered in a hospital outfit, smudged and rumpled, her face twisted in a ceaseless demeanor of torture. Her developments were slow, practically ungainly, as though she were lost in a perpetual flood. Some swore they saw her pause before hatcheries, looking at the infants inside with a demeanor of pain and gloom. The staff attempted to disregard what was going on. Staying away from the maternal ward lobby during night shifts turned into a typical practice, and the people who couldn't stay away from it would walk energetically, eyes fixed straight ahead, making an effort not to think about what they could see, but rather Sarah's presence would not be overlooked. One medical attendant especially vocal in excusing the bits of gossip experienced a more extreme mishap while evaluating clinical records in her office. A weighty rack fell without advance notice, smashing her arm. The specialist couldn't make sense of how such a strong design had fallen, totally unjustifiable. During surgery, to fix the harm, the medical attendant under sedation murmured Sarah's name over and again. That occurrence was the limit. The staff could never again excuse what was going on. As days passed, dread grasped the hospital. The workers who had been there the longest attempted to stay cool-headed, endeavoring to maintain everything under control. Yet they all knew something bigger was impacting everything. One of the most obscure nights for the hospital happened during an unexpected blackout that dove the maternity ward into completely dark dimness. The crisis generators took more time than expected to enact, leaving the staff caught in an agitating quietness. In that severe shadow, a few individuals from the staff professed to see Sarah's outline more plainly than any time in recent memory, stopping unmoving before one of the patient rooms. The people who had the disaster of encountering her depicted a feeling of vacancy and vulnerability. Sarah's quest for her child appeared to have changed her into something that could at this point not be disregarded. With each new mishap, the pressure in the hospital developed. Cautions on hatcheries started going off without reason. Entryways stuck mysteriously, and slow, purposeful strides reverberated through void passages. The hospital at last chose to make a move. A little gathering of nurses chose to examine further, digging into what had occurred on the night Sarah and her child kicked the bucket. They went through records addressed a couple of staff individuals who were currently at the hospital after the episode and looked for a clarification. What they found was considerably more decimating because of an administrative blunder. The body of Sarah's child had not been sent to the morgue with her body. Rather, it was moved to other part of the hospital and burned. Without appropriate method, the baby's remaining parts were never given to the family. Sarah never got the opportunity to express farewell to her kid. Devastated, the nurses chose to hold a symbolic act of recovery late one night. With dread and respect, they played out a service in the morgue. They utilized the doll to represent the child Sarah had lost. After that night, the occurrences started to die down. Sarah appeared to found a proportion of peace, or possibly her figure quit showing up so habitually, yet the staff knew something hazy had everlastingly denoted the hospital, despite the fact that they no longer saw her. Everybody was sure her presence had not genuinely left. Even now, while strolling through the maternity ward, staff some of the time sympathize with the cold echo of her distress, and in the quiet of the night, they keep thinking about whether Sarah actually waits, watching, grieving for the kid she was always unable to hold. The unsolved mystery. I never envisioned my specialization in perinatal pathology would lead me to question the actual limits of reality. My career, until that point, had been a progression of specialized and logical difficulties, where each case addressed a chance to learn and assist families with finding conclusion. The work was requesting, yes, yet it was also rewarding from a clinical perspective. Analyzing the reasons for unexplained fetal and neonatal passings required accuracy and thoroughness. However, what I experienced at Provision Focal Hospital perpetually really impacted my viewpoint. I had shown up at the hospital as a component of a brief exchange. The hospital required an expert to explore an unexpected spike in perinatal deaths that had frightened the staff throughout the course of recent months. I acknowledged the task, decisively certain I could contribute something significant. The hospital was current, exceptional, and the staff seemed capable, yet from the absolute first day, something about the environment disrupted me. The morgue, where I burned through the majority of my hours, was situated in an isolated basement. I had worked in numerous morgues before, yet this one felt different, harsh, as though the walls held on to dull recollections. They would not share. The lighting was faint, practically yellowish, adding a feeling of olden times to a spot that had probably been, as of late, redesigned. Yet most disrupting of everything was the quiet, a profound, choking out quietness that appeared to cover any endeavor. A clear thought. The primary cases relegated to me were confounding. The reports offered little data past the undeniable deaths, showed up without obvious signs of injury or hidden conditions to make sense of the deaths. Right away, they gave off an impression of being sudden, unexpected, unexplained demise. This was not completely surprising in my field, but rather the recurrence with which these cases were surfacing at Provision was disturbing. The main baby I autopsied left me confused. There were no noticeable signs highlighting a reason for death. The inside organs were all around framed. There were no signs of contamination or mutations, and the placenta seemed to have worked fine. As I worked fastidiously reviewing every viewpoint, I focused on eagerly wanting to discover a few hints, and afterward, I saw her first time at corner of the post-mortem examination room. Close to an old rack loaded up with neglected instruments stood a figure. It was a woman wearing white straightforward long dress that contacted her exposed feet. Her dim hair fell over her face, which was shifted downward. Her shoulders shuddered somewhat. However, I couldn't plainly see her face. It was apparent that she was crying. I froze, unfit to handle what I was seeing. My logical brain attempted to excuse it as fatigue or a stun of the light. Yet the figure stayed unmoving, apparently negligent of my presence, consumed in her own distress. I squinted a few times, attempting to clear my vision, yet the picture didn't falter. I attempted to go on with the examination, yet my fixation was broken. Each couple of seconds, my eyes would shoot back to that corner where the woman stood quietly, in the end unfit to get through the pressure anymore. I completed the strategy hurriedly and left the morgue. I rose to the upper levels, to the light and clamor of the hospital, attempting to shake off the experience. Yet the picture of the woman stayed carved to me. In the days that followed, the example rehashed the same thing. Each new case was more astounding than the last. All the embryos showed a similar odd example: no reason for death, no injury, no sickness. And each time I started a dissection, the figure of the woman would show up in a similar corner, quietly crying. I hushed up about these experiences, dreading my fellows could think I was losing my mind. I understood how things were playing out couldn't be genuine. yet it was difficult to. Disregard the morgue, once a position of purposeful separation, had turned into a site of disquiet and fear. What upset me more than anything else was the association I started to detect between the passings and the woman's appearance. Maybe she were an appearance of something bigger, something I couldn't find answers. I started diving into the hospital's set of experiences, looking for any pieces of information that could make sense of what was occurring. What I found was profoundly agitating provision. Focal Hospital had been based on the grounds of an orphanage that had worked in the mid-20th century. As per records, the orphanage had been a position of colossal enduring, where numerous kids died under painful conditions. Stories of untreated sicknesses and horrible abuse portrayed its previous. I never envisioned my specialization in perinatal pathology would lead me to scrutinize the actual limits of reality. My profession, until that point, had been a progression of specialized and logical difficulties, where each case addressed a chance to learn and assist families with finding conclusion. The work was requesting, yes, yet it was additionally rewarding from a clinical perspective. Analyzing the reasons for unexplained fetal and neonatal passings required accuracy and meticulousness, yet what I experienced at Fortune Focal Hospital everlastingly had an impact on my point of view. However, after I left, I never returned. I frequently wondered what was her relation to the children or to the orphans died here hundreds of years ago. Maybe she was a caretaker who was now punished to roam in the hospital due to the abuse she did on poor little souls. Or maybe she was a grieving mother. She kept on seeming grieving the lives lost too early. Maybe she stayed attached to that place, perpetually looking for the kid she had lost quite a while in the past. Or maybe she was an appearance of the tragic past that had saturated the hospital's very establishment. Even now, as I work in an alternate hospital, I end up investigating my shoulder, half hoping to see her remaining toward the side of the room, her quiet tears, an indication of the delicacy of life and the unwavering grasp of sorrow.